Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we are going to be reviewing the album Upon a Mess by the band Sentryturn.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So this prog metal album has a lot of interesting things found on it, and I think it's a really cool album, and I believe the best way for me to share with you my favorite parts of it is by just letting you hear them, so enjoy my favorite bits of this album.
The city is calm, the sky moves aside. Follow yours behind the bush, but you'll still fight.
Sentryturn, they're a relatively new prog metal prog band. They formed in Berlin in 2015, but the bandmates, they all knew each other beforehand, and that really shows on the chemistry that there is between them inside of the band and what is featured on this album. So I think one of the most interesting things that I found on this album when researching about it is the fact that they have a really odd lineup of bandmates. And what I mean by that is they actually have one bassist, one drummer, and 3 guitarists which all alternate on the keyboards. Now I can totally understand having one guitarist, and I can also understand having 2 guitarists in a band. One is rhythm, one is like the solo guitar, but having 3 guitars in the same band playing at once is really interesting, but we'll get into that inside this album because it has some really unique qualities to it. Now I looked into this album and this band beforehand, and I saw that this was a metal album, and of course, much like me, I know there's a lot of you who don't really like the genre or the style of music that is metal, but trust me, this is something different, and I bet you can learn and actually enjoy some of this, so stay tuned. Now, as I said, I, as someone who is not a huge metal fan, actually found a lot of things to relate to on this album. Cause I don't think, at least for me, it's not that heavy actually. It's really not that heavy. I'm not saying it as like a lightness of a compliment to this album. It really is quite tender, quite mellow. It's not that, hard hitting with, it has no growls, at least I've not seen any on it. And one of the things that really struck out to me in this album was the immense depth of sound on here. Going back to what I said before about having 3 guitarists, that's exactly where it comes into play. Something about having 3 guitarists play at the same time and combining their own efforts into one cohesive sound makes a lot of depth that is unachievable in any other way. And considering the fact that each guitar has some filters on it usually, and the fact that they're layered up on top of each other, really makes the music feel much more real and alive and atmospheric in a way that no other band really does, and I found that to be really interesting. Now I actually listened to this album beforehand, and I did not know that they had 3 guitars, and I was enjoying the sounds, and I knew that there was something unique about this certain sound, but I did not know what. And in the middle of the album I was reading one review that actually said that the bandmates have 3 guitarists and that they use it in some weird way, which one does, or I think 2 do the rhythm and one does something completely different, and then it all merges into something more cohesive and actually really interesting as a whole. And yeah, this type of sound is almost really unreachable with one guitar unless you're using some sorts of like layering and mixing and stuff like that. This is truly a masterpiece of using multiples of the same instrument. And I think if you're interested and want to see how that sounds, I think it's really prominent on the second part of the big piece called Upon a Mess inside this album, which is called Upon a Mess Overtones. Now I know that in some places this big piece, or at least this semi-length piece, is considered as one thing, but it's actually divided into 3 parts, which are Upon a Mess Collateral, Overtones, and Revised. And yeah, if I had to say, I think this album is really cohesive. It's really well made and everyone is playing on here greatly, and I love the fact that they do what they do. And this album serves great justice to the metal genre, although I do believe that it could be a bit more proggy at times. I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that if it is considered as prog, this could have gone one step further into the realm of prog music. And I'm saying all this because I know this is great music, but I also know that I am not a huge metal fan, and this album will be rated accordingly. And all the songs here, in my opinion, are actually pretty equally good. Like, they all received the same rating. There was no low points and high points when it comes to the songs on this album. But if I had to choose one song which I'd say is the best off here, I'd have to go with the first piece of the long track, which is called Upon a Mess Collateral. And that would mostly be for its usage of the 7/4 time signature, or is it 3 4s and 4 4s alternating? I'm not entirely sure, but it has some of that oomph put into it by that odd time signature. So sometimes, actually a lot of times, we get to listen to new music on here, like this album that came out, if I believe, in 2019, which is like, I'd say 3 years ago, but it does feel like 2 years ago. And it's really good music that came out in the recent years. And that is always an uplifting thought, to see that there's still good music coming out and that we don't have to rely on what the past has given us as our only source of actual enjoyable music. So when it comes to the cover of this album, I think it's kind of meh in some way. It's not all that amazing, it's not bad in any way. I think the concept of it is good, but something about the way it's performed and actually done is not all that flattering. I think it's kind of crude if you look into it, and maybe that's the art style. I actually looked into the Instagram of the artist that made this, and he has some really nice things on here by the same lines of this cover, but I do believe that this one is nice, but not more than that. So if I had to rate this album, I would give it a not so fair 7 out of 10, and that is because I am not a huge metal fan. And I'm not a huge Ceiling fan, and I'm not a huge Heating fan. But of course, I'm just kidding with you all. The fact that I don't like this music naturally doesn't mean it's bad music. I just have to rate it accordingly because this is still my opinion and my reviews. But anyway guys, I guess this is about it, and stay tuned because tomorrow you're gonna be listening to Pawn Hearts by Fender Graph Generator. But I guess that's about it everyone. I hope that you enjoyed this one. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.